Fuck COVID-19. Hello and welcome to the Perpetual Now. I'm your host, Eason, and today I'm going to tell you why I call this segment, and the channel, actually, the Perpetual Now. I started this channel to talk about the music that I love. That doesn't always mean new music. It doesn't always have new albums or new ventures in it. Sometimes it's going to be old. Sometimes it's going to be dated, even. But the point is, when you discover something, an album, for instance, that you love, it doesn't really matter when it was made. If it's good, it will always be good. Now, with that in mind, let's talk about the incomparable Betty Blowtorch. Betty Blowtorch. Sounds like Rosie the Riveter, doesn't it? Just a little bit? Well, Rosie the Riveter was making munitions to help the war effort. Betty Blowtorch is just here to burn your house right the fuck down to ash. Betty Blowtorch is a Southern California punk/hard rock band that was born after the disintegration of the Los Angeles punk outfit Butt Trumpet. The band released their first EP titled Get Off in 1999, and then their first and unfortunately to date only full-length album, Are You Man Enough, in 2001, which is what I'm going to be talking about today. Now, just like I have with the band's name, Betty Blowtorch, I want you to consider the name of this album. Are you man enough? The one thing that I want you to keep in mind when considering this question is that there is no hidden agenda here. This isn't a political statement. This isn't an ideological assertion. This does not have any hidden meaning, nor is this a dare. It is simply a question. Are you man enough? This question is about as simple and blunt as the trauma that you're probably gonna suffer if you enter Betty Blowtorch's world without the answer being an unhesitating, resounding yes. In a similar vein, and or as an extension of this thought, the fact that these ladies are extremely badass isn't presented as something that is open for debate. It isn't asserted to be a talking point in anything. It is presented as being a simple, self-evident truth. The reason why I'm standing on this point is because Betty Blowtorch's attitude is one of the major things that define them. And there's something going on upstairs. Fuck. I mean, what else would you expect from an album that starts with a song that is literally titled Hell on Wheels, which Betty Blowtorch pretty much is. From the opening notes of Hell on Wheels, it becomes pretty apparent that you are in for a jolly good time. But you are not in for a good time unless you're a timid wallflower who just wants to sit there and sip on his glass of wine or something. The very spirit of Betty Blowtorch is rock and roll itself distilled into 15 tracks on this record. This isn't the type of punk rock that is all about broken hearts and mending relationships or whatever. This is hard rock with a punk attitude. This is all leather and denim, where your Harley boots and a couple of beers down at the local dive bar was the start of a beautiful evening. Apropos of this, Betty Blowtorch delivers their mission statement in the opening track of this album, a tradition that I believe has been forgotten for way too long. And they make the statement in the chorus with the lines, "Watch out for us, we're hell on wheels," and they sure as fuck are. I've seen Betty Blowtorch lumped in quite frequently with Riot Grrrl bands, but I don't think that is a fair categorization. I don't have anything against Riot Grrrl bands at all. They should do their thing, absolutely, but I don't think Betty Blowtorch quite fits that bill. I mean, when I think Betty Blowtorch, I don't think Bikini Kill or Bratmobile. I think Girl School, I think Wendy O. Williams, I think The Runaways. In terms of music, Are You Man Enough is basically sleazy hard rock, filtered through punk rock, delivered with the attitude and brazenness of actual punk, presented with addictive and infectious hook in the manner of glam rock. All of this is laid under a balls-to-the-wall, take-no-prisoners attitude for miles. This combination yields a very potent mixture of pure rock and roll as rock and roll used to be. This isn't the modern, glossily produced type of rock that always wastes time trying to fit into certain templates in order to make some sort of mediocre bottom line. This is rock and roll at its purest, and of course, when you say rock and roll, there's only three components. When you say rock and roll, you have to keep in mind that it isn't a single thing. It consists of three main ingredients, which is sex, drugs, and rock and roll. Let's start with the sex. Betty Blowtorch is extremely and refreshingly brazen about what they have to say about that. Sex in Betty Blowtorch's world is regarded simply as sex. I mean, hell, the third track on this album is literally titled Size Queen, and it is basically about what you would expect from this title. That song is also home to the album's only, and I think one of the weirdest features that I have ever seen, because it has Vanilla Ice in it. Yes, Vanilla Ice. That Vanilla Ice. Mr. Ice Baby is on this track talking about an almost 10-inch dick. There's more than just one song that deals primarily with sex on this album. The tracks that deal with this topic are Size Queen, like I just mentioned, the aptly titled Shut Up and Fuck, Part-Time Hooker, which is the story about a woman who decides to become a part-time hooker to earn more money and make a better living, I Wanna Be Your Sucker, which includes the line I Am Your Booty Call, and Strung Out. And then there's Rock My World, which you might think that the song may contain the line You Rock My World, but no. The song is about a girl who was stood up, rocking her own world. It's things like this that makes this album incredibly fun to listen to and extremely engaging. I mean, there's only one point in which a sort of vulnerability and insecurity is expressed, and that song is actually a carryover from the band's butt trumpet days. The song is I'm Ugly and I Don't Know Why, in which a girl was told she is ugly from pretty much everyone, including child molesters, by the way. And this whole thing is played for laughs, but there is a moment of genuine introspection and genuine insecurity that is being expressed. Of course, this is sort of steamrolled over by the appearance of the next track, which is Shut Up and Fuck, which sort of pulls you out of that headspace and straight back into the hellscape that is Betty Blowtorch's world. And then there's the song Frankie, about Frankie, the guy who leaves his girlfriend for Patty Patterson, the girl's best friend who also happens to have big tits, which is almost immediately followed by the entirely appropriate I Wish You Die, which has some really interesting vocal performances in that while the line I Wish You Die is itself delivered with force and with gusto, the background vocals are extremely soft and sweet on this one. This dichotomy creates a sort of soft-spoken type of viciousness that is way more potent than either a dissonant soft approach or a brazenly violent one. Speaking of which, there are songs about heartbreak on this album as well, but they are not about dainty damsels lamenting the downfall of their relationship with some guy that they have been seeing for like 6 months. The first song about heartbreak that appears in the album, which when I say heartbreak, I mean pure emotional devastation, is Love/Hate, which is basically about an abysmal marriage. We've covered the sex. What about the drugs? Interestingly enough, there are no songs on this album that are primarily about drugs. Although the song Strung Out sort of presents sex as a kind of drug, it is not about drugs themselves. Now, we covered the sex and the drugs, but what about the rock and roll? Well, throughout the album, the band sort of fades in and out of using rock and roll purely as a theme for their songs. There is, for instance, the song No Integrity, which is characterized by its hook, which goes, "We've got no integrity, but we sure do look good," which is an apparent and obvious stab at pop stars. Just like with everything else that is presented in the album, this isn't an attempt on Betty Blowtorch's part to gain street cred or to see more rock and roll. It is being presented as an obvious and self-evident fact that manufactured pop stars have no integrity, but they do look good. And then there's the wonderfully nostalgic Big Hair, Broken Heart, a song that is basically a love letter to 80s hair metal bands. Even begins with "We Love You, Lita Ford." The thing about Are You Man Enough that is so incredibly immersive, however, isn't that these songs are fun, engaging, and quite easy on the ears. It is the fact that this entire album feels like a live gig. Seriously, with its ebb and flow, with its harder and softer moments, with its even pacing, with its masterful flow, with its progression from the first track to the last, and especially the fact that the closing track, Rock and Roll 69, feels just like the final track of a gig that carries the same sense of sadness that it is ending, that this has been a moment that was suspended in time for you and for your memories, but it is now over. Which unfortunately proved to be the case for Betty Blowtorch. You see, Are You Man Enough was released in May, and come December 2001, Bianca Halstead, aka Bianca Butthole, the leader of Betty Blowtorch, was killed in a car accident. With her death, Betty Blowtorch also died. The band released a compilation titled Last Call, and then they have been the subject of a documentary, but music-wise, Are You Man Enough still remains to be the band's first and, like I said, unfortunately final full-length album. This is a point that I believe is beyond just being sad or being a loss for the world of rock and roll, because I happen to think that the world desperately needed more of Betty Blowtorch. When I say the world needed more, I don't mean that Betty Blowtorch should have done more. Not at all. I mean that this band of badass chicks had quite a lot to offer. The very existence of Betty Blowtorch, from the songs to the lyrics to the clothes to the attitude to the album art to everything, embodies rock and roll. And with that comes the feeling that they just don't do it like this anymore. You see, the album might be old, it's almost 20 years old in fact, but it is still as fresh as it was on the day it was made. It has that timeless quality mainly because it is less about following trends and or less about fitting a certain framework and more about just being what it is. And the fact that it sounds like these ladies went into the studio every single day during the recording of this album and tried to come up with the last song that they're going to go out on and managed to come up with not one but 15 of them and put them together makes it a monumental achievement in my eyes. The complete lack of concern or consideration saved for anything achieving an actual image or a sort of central message is extremely refreshing, and this album doesn't require you to be anything but a rock fan. It just needs you to be able to rock and to be able to withstand the blunt force of Betty Blowtorch in your fucking face. As such, I'm not going to be doing this album a disservice by giving it a mark, like X out of 5 or 10. I'm just going to say that if you are in any way a fan of rock, you need to hear this album. There will be a link in the description to a playlist on YouTube that features this album, and I suggest when you finish this video, you click that and go listen to this album. But really listen. Don't just stand there listening. Hear it. Hear the spirit of Betty Blowtorch and let it take you over. Now, I think I'm just gonna finish up this video and go listen to that album one more time. This is Eason. Peace out. Fuck COVID-19.
Stay safe. Stay sane.
And if you like my content, please subscribe. I said now.